Good morning, everyone. This is Mark McCord, the host of a brand new podcast, Some Stops Along the Way. Every journey has a beginning, and this is the beginning of one that I hope will be enriching for you. I'm certain that it will be for me. So let's do some business first before we get started, since this is the first episode. Let's talk about what some stops along the way will be and what it won't be. I'll start with what it won't be. This is not a podcast where you're going to hear me rant about different issues or talk about things that I don't know or criticize others in order to gain more following or to be controversial just because I can. Everybody's got an opinion, and everyone's opinion is worth something. What I hope to do on this podcast, rather, is to share some experiences that I've had working around the world on 5 different continents, almost 95 countries, and sharing some things I've learned and some leadership principles, some really funny stories, some poignant stories, providing you some information about some places that maybe you've been, maybe you would like to go, or maybe you'll never go, but you would like to know a little bit more about them. This podcast is going to be a world tour, and I hope that you'll go with me as we explore some fascinating countries, we meet some fascinating people, and we unpack some things that are really important in our lives. Hopefully it'll broaden understanding. Hopefully it will be engaging. Hopefully it'll make you laugh. Hopefully it will make you cry at some point in time, because I will tell you, emotion is very important. People react to an emotional bond that they build with something. And one thing I've learned around the world is that emotional attachment remains. You may no longer be in a country, you may no longer be with people, but the emotional attachment is still there. And that's why I have friends all around the world in whom I've invested my life, and they've invested their life in mine. So some stops along the way will explore a lot of different topics, but more than anything else, it's going to reinforce some of the principles that we already know, but in addition, it will help us explore some things that maybe we haven't thought about before. Things that will enrich our lives, things that will help us take the next step in our career, our life, our relationships, etc. And a lot of what we'll talk about in this podcast goes back to, and here is an advertisement for you right out of the box. It goes back to my memoirs, Some Stops Along the Way. And I'll talk this morning about how my journey started. But Some Stops Along the Way is coming out June the 2nd. It'll be available on Amazon. It's a really interesting read, and it'll track along with a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast. So I hope that you will take some time to go on Amazon and read about it, and hopefully order it and join me on the journey that I think will not only take you around the world, but will allow you to really explore the lives and the cultures of interesting people and places around the world. All right, let's get started here. Where did my journey begin? Some stops along the way. Well, my first stop, if you will, was in Bellflower, California, where I was born. Many, many years ago. You can probably tell by looking at me that I am not a spring chicken, so to speak. I am in my early 60s and was born in Bellflower, California, but very soon after my birth, we relocated to the state of Oklahoma, where I was raised in the western part of Oklahoma. If you know how Oklahoma's shaped, it has this panhandle and then comes down like this. Well, I was raised in northwest Oklahoma, out on the prairie, where you can give directions by trees and cows standing in particular places. And I really value having grown up in that rural environment. Not so much then, because when you're growing up, you always want to explore something new, right? And I grew up in a very rural area of the state of Oklahoma, in a town of 158 or so people, Sharon, Oklahoma. It's still there to this day. It's a little bit worse for the wear, just because that's the nature of small towns. But I love going back there now and seeing my roots. And I remember very fondly in my earlier years of growing up in that town, going down to play basketball at the elementary school gymnasium. There were a lot of dead spots in that floor. There were more dead spots in that floor than you can imagine. But I played a lot of games in my imagination on that floor. Boston Celtics defeated the LA Lakers in the NBA Finals in my imagination many, many times on that floor. We had a tennis court, believe it or not, in this tiny little town, but it didn't have a net on it. And on that court, Bjorn Borg beat Jimmy Connors many, many times in Wimbledon, in my imagination. It was a beautiful experience to grow up there. One that I minimized and didn't appreciate at the time. And many of you might have been in the same situation, whether you grew up in a city or whether you grew up in a rural area. Sometimes we don't appreciate where we grow up. And so the stop along the way that I made in growing up in that town, I wish that I had enjoyed and appreciated more. In my book, you'll read about some of my experiences in growing up. I won't go into them a lot here this morning, but it was a very interesting place because everyone knew each other. There were 30 people in my graduating class, and 5 of them, I believe, were my cousins. So it was a very small school. And even in that small class, I love to tell people now that I was in the top 30 of my graduating class, which I was. There were only 30 of us, and I was definitely in the top 30. I wasn't the most popular kid in school by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that I couldn't have bought a date with the proceeds from a stolen armored car when I was in high school. There was one young lady that I asked out so many times in high school, and to her credit, she came up with amazing excuses not to go out with me. I think her mother actually liked me better than she did. But at any rate, that's how I grew up. We didn't have much money. Most of the kids I knew, their parents didn't have much money. But we didn't know that because we were all just kids in a rural area making our way. And we had big dreams, things that we wanted to do. What I knew I didn't want to do was stay in that small town. And so I would spend every waking hour of my free time reading about places that I knew I would never go, about experiences I knew I would never have, about people I knew I would never meet. I actually read the World Book Encyclopedia, true story. So you can log off of this podcast now and never come back if you think that I'm an absolute freak for doing that. But I did it because I was so desperate to engage with a world that I never thought that I would ever experience. And I knew that there was one way out of that town for me, and that was through knowledge. Through gaining as much knowledge as possible, and then having the courage to step out and do something on my own. But that plan almost got derailed in high school, as I came to the conclusion that I was never getting out of that small town. And so everything that I tried that was too difficult, I just quit. And I remember one time my father asked me, he said, it seems like you're quitting a lot of things. Why? And I said, well, why not? I mean, here I am, Sharon, Oklahoma, population 158. I'm never getting out of here. And he shared with me the liturgy of his life and how his life had unfolded and how he ended up in a place that he never thought that he would, because life had dealt him a hand of cards that he didn't expect. And I'll talk more about that later. But I started thinking about that, and I started realizing that if I got stuck in that town, in that rural area, it wasn't the fault of those around me. It wasn't the fault of my teachers in high school. It wasn't the fault of my parents who moved me from sunny Southern California when I was a baby to rural Oklahoma. If I stayed in that town, it was my fault. And I want to say right up front that many of the people I went to school with still live in that area to this day. And I'm glad for them. That's what they wanted to do. That's the life that they chose. And they're living a good life. And I appreciate them to this day. But it's not the life that I wanted to choose, but I had to choose whether I was willing to take the risk, to overcome my fear, to step out of that town, and to embrace the life that I wanted. And the first step in that was going to university. When I graduated from high school in 1980 from this little school in rural Oklahoma, I went to University of Southwestern Oklahoma State in Weatherford, 65, 70 miles to the south. And for the first time, I was in an environment that was much larger than I was used to, and that was away from everybody that I knew. I made such great friends there. The university experience I had at Southwestern Oklahoma State really played a key role in my life. But I'm here to tell you it didn't start off that way. Because my first 2 weeks on campus, I was ready to give up. I was ready to get in my old $300 1969 Buick LeSabre and either drive home or drive it toward home until the gas ran out. Because I thought I was out of place. I didn't know anybody. I was living in a dormitory for the first time where I didn't have any friends. It was so unlike anything that I had experienced in my life up to that point. I didn't know whether I could handle it. But some things happened that really cemented my existence, if you will, or my ability to put myself on the track to the life that I wanted. And one of them was a professor. Her name was Elsie Lang. And I remember the first paper that I turned in her English class at Southwestern Oklahoma State University. One of the things that I knew I could do, of all the things I didn't think I could do, because I hadn't had chemistry and trigonometry and calculus and upper level biology that most of these other university students had had. So I was totally out of my depth in those. But the one thing I knew I could do was write. I'd been writing since I was young. I'd always got nothing but A's in writing all the way through high school. And so I was very proud to be in her class and to turn in that first paper in my freshman year, being on campus just a couple of weeks, because that was the thing I knew I could do. A week or 10 days later, I show up for class, she hands our papers back. And I'll never forget it when she laid that paper down on my desk. And I looked at it and it said C minus. And then worse than that, underneath it said see me. I knew right then, this is it. I can't do this. I'm going to go home. But after class, I waited till the end, walked to the front of the room, said, Dr. Lang, you wanted to see me. I'll never forget it. She had these little half glasses. She put them down like this. She said, oh, Mr. McCord, yes. Said, you're from the northwest part of the state, yes? Small school. I've done a little asking around about you, and I found out that you went to a very small school. Yes, I did. You stay on campus most of the time? Yeah, most of the time. I don't go home very much because I don't have a lot of money, so I want to conserve it and be able to make sure that I can pay my tuition. And I've got a car that gets terrible gas mileage, so I can't spend the money a lot to go home. She paused a moment and looked at me and said, and you consider yourself a writer, yes? And I said, well, I thought I was until I got this paper back. And she said, well, regrettably, you're not. And my heart just sank. But then she said something that changed the trajectory of my life. She said, Mr. McCord, you're not a great writer. But I see the raw material here. And you can be a great writer. You can be an amazing writer if you want to do the work. And if you're willing to do the work, then I'm willing to do the work. And I'll teach you to write on my own time if that's what you want to do. But it's going to cost you something. I'm going to expect you to turn in papers. I'm going to expect you to take this seriously. And if you're ready to do that, I'll teach you to write. Take it or leave it right now. And I thought for a moment and said, I'll take it. And that began a almost 4-year odyssey of a relationship being built with Dr. Lang. And it changed the trajectory of my life because she truly taught me how to write. She pushed me to the edge of everything that I thought I could do. Sometimes even past the edge. She pushed me. But I was able to learn how to put the thoughts that were in my head on paper in a way that would resonate with people. I remember the first time that I handed her a paper and she read it And I looked at her and I saw that her eyes were filling with tears. And I said, did I do something wrong? She said, no, 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 no. This touches me. This is the kind of writing that I knew that you could do. This is it. This is what I've been talking about the whole time. Do this. And so I continued on. That gave me the confidence I needed. And I went through my undergraduate, gaining more and more confidence, gaining more and more friends. There are many people that I still consider friends today from university who so enriched my life, who took this young man with very little skills from a small town in Oklahoma and laid the foundation for everything that he was going to do later on. By the way, the last time that I was with Dr. Lang on campus before I graduated, I made a special point of stopping by her house to return a book that I'd borrowed from her. And said, you know, I'm getting ready to graduate, and I just need you to know that you changed my life. And I don't know how in the world I can ever thank you for what you did for me. And she said, well, you can write me a novel. That's how you can thank me. And years later, I did that. It took me a long time, but I did that. My first novel was called Intersections. It's available on Amazon as well. It's a work of historical fiction. And I'm very pleased that I wrote it at the time that I did, because it was before she passed away. And I had the opportunity to send her a copy of the book for her to read. She didn't use a computer or email, so I remember getting a call from her one day after she had received the book and read it. And she was so happy. She said, Mark, you said you'd write me a novel, and you did. I read it. My book club now is reading it. I'm so thrilled with the story. It's emotional. It's just great in so many ways. And I was so happy. I said, well, thank you so much, Dr. Lang. I really appreciate that. And she said, but do you have the book in front of you? Yeah, if you do, why don't you turn to page 4, because there's something there that I think you could have done better. And so for the next several minutes, she walked me through things that she found in the book that she would have changed. And rather than being upset about it or disturbed by it, I almost had to laugh because it was so her. I would have actually been more concerned if she said it was perfect, don't change a thing. But again, even then, she was making me a better writer. And quite frankly, through her example, a better person. Because now I try to use the experience that I have to pour into the lives of younger people who are trying to build a career in economic development and international development, which is what I've spent my life doing. And I do that to honor her. So after university, the day after I graduated from university, another thing happened that changed my life. I got married to the right woman. And I'm telling you, I've seen this firsthand. If you marry the right woman or the right spouse, let's say this, whoever that is, you are going to be exponentially blessed. If you marry the wrong person, it can derail your life. I was fortunate to marry the right one. And we've been married now for 41 years. Have a son, 2 beautiful grandchildren. But my wife, Debbie, has been the seminal character in making me the person that I am. Through her example. We've been apart for large swaths of time. throughout my career because I was traveling. I was overseas. I was gone, working. And yet she supported me every step of the way. She never complained. And those times that she went with me and had to leave her family and her friends and be in a culture that sometimes she didn't even appreciate or understand or like, she never complained. And that level of support was amazing and was life-changing. And I can only say today that the regret that I have is that I didn't provide her the level of support she provided me. That's my failure. That's a lesson that you can learn. Whoever your significant other is, this street runs both ways. They support you, you support them. And certainly, the support she gave me was seminal to my building the career that I've had. But it was not easy. So, after university, got married, another thing happened that changed my life. I started managing a clothing store in my wife's hometown of Woodward, Oklahoma, which was 12 miles from where I grew up in this small town of Sharon. And the man that owned his clothing store was a great guy, and he took a chance on me. And he gave me a lot of confidence to do things that I didn't think I could do. To manage people, to manage budgets, to buy inventory for the store, to sell on a sales floor, to make connections. And it was one of those connections, the postmaster of Woodward, Oklahoma at the time, his name was Alan Case, I'll never forget it, who after a few years of my managing that store came to me and said, you know, Mark, the Chamber of Commerce job here in town just opened up. The economy's terrible. Nobody really wants the job, but you've got a lot of energy and you're young. I know you don't have any experience, but would you consider doing this? And I talked to Debbie and decided, yeah, I'll do it. And I'll be honest with you now that I did it because it paid $2,000 more than I was making at the clothing store. That's the only reason I did it. Because I didn't know anything about a Chamber of Commerce or what it did. The day I walked in that building, every employee in there knew more than I did. But that's where I met somebody else who changed my life. His name was Laverne Phillips. One of the most respected city fathers of Woodward, Oklahoma at that time. Laverne's still alive today. And I owe him a debt of gratitude. I don't know that I've ever fully told him how much that his mentorship of that young Chamber of Commerce executive meant. But he helped me make connections. He plugged me into the local leadership, to the state leadership. And a few years later, I was elected by the Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce executives as Executive of the Year, Chamber of Commerce Executive of the Year for the state of Oklahoma. A few years later, after I got some more experience, I moved to be president and CEO of the Enid, Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce. Had another great mentor there in H. Bud Champlin, who owned an oil company. It was just a great friend of mine, and there were so many people there that poured into my life. And after a few years there, I moved to to be president and CEO of a larger Chamber of Commerce in Lawton, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I had amazing mentors there, like guys like a lawyer and my first chairman of the board, Bill Burgess, Fred Fitch, Colonel Donald Crusher Craigie at Vance Air Force Base. Just amazing people who poured into my life. And the smartest thing I did in those years was not what I did, it's what I heard and how I internalized that and learned from it. So, after the Lawton Fort Sill Chamber of Commerce, I was recruited by the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce and became president and CEO of a very large Chamber of Commerce in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It was a challenging time. It was a time that stretched me to the limits because I didn't have the kind of support network there that I did in Oklahoma. I'd stepped away from all the connections I had in the state of Oklahoma into a whole new environment. But we had a young, aggressive team, and Colorado Springs was growing so fast, and we were having so much success there. And during this period, another thing happened that changed my life. And that is I began doing international projects with the Center for International Private Enterprise, which is the international division of the United States Chamber of Commerce. I was teaching at U.S. Chamber Institute and helping younger executives learn this business, and one of the people that was in my class at the University of Colorado during a summer session was one of the leaders of the U.S. Chamber's overseas program, and she invited me to take my first international trip to train Chamber of Commerce executives overseas. And I took her up on that. And that was the first step in what became the foundation of my career in international development. And we'll get into that on future sessions of this podcast. I was at Colorado Springs as president and CEO of that Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to go overseas full-time for what I thought would be a 3-year tour as a project director in Romania for an economic growth project that was funded by the U.S. government. And that turned into 23 years overseas, 5 continents, working with wonderful people and wonderful teams and immersing myself in cultures all over the world. And that's some of what we're going to unpack on some stops along the way. But I want to end this first episode by telling you this. Everything that I've just talked about, none of that happens without 3 things. Number 1, without my commitment to learning. It's something I'm still doing to this day. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, I'm trying. I'm an old dog, but I'm trying to learn new tricks. And I am learning them each and every day. The second thing is that I overcame my fears and I walked through the doors that were open. Even if I didn't know what was on the other side, I walked through the door and I overcame the inhibitions that I had. And I embraced every opportunity to learn and to grow. Pardon me. And I did a third thing as well. I made connections. I connected with great mentors, great teams, great friends throughout my career who helped propel me to the next level. Anybody out there that thinks that you can build the career or the life you want on your own, I'm afraid you're mistaken. And I think that social media has become, for all of the good things social media offers, I think that it's become an inhibition as well. Because we look at the lives people live online, many of which are not even real. And we compare ourselves to that. And we think sometimes, how can I ever achieve what they're achieving? They're traveling all over the world. They're doing all of these things. The fact is that there's only one person who can get you to where you're going, and that's you. There's only one person who can make the choice to embrace learning, to overcome their fears, to make those connections. Okay, you can't do it on your own. You need others around you. It takes a village to build the kind of life you want. But it starts with you. It starts with you taking that first step. There's a trite phrase that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and that's true. Have you taken that first step? Or are you still in that iron box that you built yourself, your zone of safety? Well, I'll leave you with this. One of the things I learned in my career, especially early on in my career, that I want to share with you today before we close, is this. Years ago, a management guru wrote a book and made many speeches about something that everyone embraced immediately. It's getting out of the box. Okay, freeing your mind. Get out of that zone of safety. Get out of that box and innovate, create, take a chance. And that became a mantra for leadership. Get out of the box. Well, I'm sure that the person who came up with that philosophy made a lot of money. And I know that they got a lot of visibility from it. But the fact is, it's wrong. The whole concept is wrong. Because what happens when you get out of the box and something goes wrong? Things don't go the way you thought. People laugh at you. You fail. What happens? Human nature tells you, you go back to that zone of safety. You go back to that box. So I'm sitting here today on this first podcast of some stops along the way, having written this book about the stops that I've made all over the world through my 40-year career. I'm sitting here not because I got out of the box, because there are many times that I would have gone back to that zone of safety, as I almost did by dropping out of university after 2 weeks and going home. The way I got here, the way that all of this happened, is that I tore up the box. I got rid of the box. There was nothing to go back to. I went forward. And I embraced the opportunities that came my way. Hey, it's been great to be with you this morning. This is Some Stops Along the Way podcast number 1. And from here on out, we're going to start unpacking some of the really interesting places that I've been in the world, some of the interesting people that I've met in the world, and we're going to unpack some awesome leadership stuff along the way. So I hope that you will join me. Subscribe to this podcast, not just because I want the followers. Subscribe to it because I think that it will add some enrichment to your life. It'll make you feel good. You don't have to feel angry. You don't have to feel conflicted. You don't have to hear somebody rant and argue and criticize for an hour or an hour and a half. Some stops along the way will be uplifting, it'll be educational, and you'll meet some really interesting people and hear some stories that I think that you'll find very interesting and explore some great cultures around the world. Blessings to all of you. See you next time.